I pulled into the parking spot 3 blocks away from the Riverside Community Center and felt that familiar knot in my stomach tighten, the same spot they always made me use. Not because there wasn't parking closer, but because according to my family, I needed to stay humble and remember where I came from. Funny how the police chief of Riverside Heights still had to walk past the gas station, the old laundromat, and 2 residential blocks just to attend her own nephew's birthday party. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The July heat was brutal that afternoon, my dress uniform sticking to my back as I carried Tyler's birthday gift toward the community center. I could see the parking lot half full, plenty of spaces available right by the entrance where normal families would park. But the Mitchell family had their rules, and Sarah Mitchell apparently needed to be reminded that badge or no badge, she was still just little Sarah who used to spill juice on herself at family dinners. I was halfway through my trek when I heard footsteps behind me, heavy and purposeful. A voice called out, rough but respectful. "Excuse me, ma'am." I turned to see Marcus Thompson, Jake's friend from the security company. Big guy, probably 6'3", with the kind of presence that suggested military background. I'd seen him at a few family gatherings, always polite but kept to himself mostly. "Yes," I replied, shifting Tyler's gift to my other arm. Marcus looked confused, his brow furrowed as he glanced back toward the community center, then at me again. "I'm sorry, Chief Mitchell, but why are you walking from way back there?" "There's plenty of parking by the building, Chief Mitchell." Not Sarah, not Jake's sister. Chief Mitchell. The respect in his voice hit me like cold water. When was the last time someone in my family had used my title? When had they ever acknowledged what I'd accomplished? Marcus looked genuinely puzzled, like the idea of the town's police chief hiking 3 blocks to a family party was absurd. Because it was absurd. "Oh," I managed, feeling heat creep up my neck that had nothing to do with the summer sun. "It's complicated." Marcus tilted his head. "Complicated how? You're the chief of police. You could park in the fire lane if you wanted and nobody would say a word." He paused, studying my face. "Did someone tell you to park back there?" The question hung in the air between us, and suddenly I felt ridiculous. Here I was, a woman who commanded respect from criminals and city officials alike, who'd worked 18-hour days to clean up this town's drug problem, who'd been featured on the cover of Law Enforcement Today magazine just last month, walking 3 blocks because my brother said I needed to check my ego at the door. Marcus was waiting for an answer, his expression growing more concerned by the second. Behind him, I could see other families arriving, pulling right up to the entrance, unloading their kids and gifts with ease. Normal families who didn't feel the need to humble their successful members. "My family," I started, then stopped. "How do you explain to someone that the people who should be proudest of you are the ones who work hardest to cut you down to size?" "They think I need to remember my place." "Your place," Marcus repeated, his voice rising slightly. "Chief, with respect, your place is wherever you damn well want it to be. You run this town's police force. You've cut crime by 30% since you took over. My company works with your department all the time, and every officer I've met speaks about you like you walk on water." I blinked at him, surprised. I knew my officers respected me, but hearing it from an outsider felt different. More real somehow. "They don't see it that way," I said quietly. Marcus shook his head slowly. "Then they're not looking very hard." He gestured toward the community center. "Come on, Chief, let me walk with you. And next time you park wherever you want. Anyone has a problem with that, they can take it up with me." As we walked the remaining block together, Marcus told me about his military service, his work in private security, and how much he admired the changes I'd brought to the police department. It was surreal, having this conversation while approaching a family gathering where I'd be treated like an afterthought at best. We reached the entrance, and Marcus held the door open for me. "After you, Chief." Inside, the community center buzzed with typical Mitchell family chaos. Kids running around, adults clustered in their usual groups, the smell of pizza and birthday cake mixing with the scent of industrial carpet and old air conditioning. It looked like every family gathering I'd attended for the past 35 years. But something felt different this time. Maybe it was Marcus's words echoing in my head, or maybe it was the way he'd looked genuinely shocked that anyone would make me park 3 blocks away. Whatever it was, I found myself seeing the scene with new eyes. Jake spotted me first, his face lighting up in that performative way he'd perfected over the years. "Sarah, there's my big sister." He bounded over, arms outstretched for a hug that felt more like a wrestling move. "How's our little police officer doing?" Little police officer. Not chief. Not even just police officer. Little police officer, like I was playing dress up instead of running a department of 43 sworn officers. "I'm fine, Jake," I replied, accepting his aggressive hug while trying to keep hold of Tyler's gift. Jake's attention shifted immediately to his friend. "Glad you could make it, man. Did you meet my sister? She's in law enforcement." Law enforcement. Like I directed traffic or wrote parking tickets. Marcus looked between Jake and me, clearly processing something. "Yeah, we met outside. I was just asking Chief Mitchell why she was walking from so far away." The word chief landed in the conversation like a dropped bowling ball. Jake's smile flickered for just a moment, and I saw his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "Oh, you know Sarah," Jake said with a forced laugh. "Always so modest, doesn't like to make a big deal about her little job." Little job. I felt something crack inside my chest, a sound like ice breaking on a winter pond. Marcus's expression shifted, his friendly demeanor cooling several degrees as he looked at my brother. "Little job." Marcus repeated slowly. "Jake, your sister is the chief of police. She runs the entire department." "Well, sure," Jake backtracked, but I could see the irritation in his eyes. He didn't like being corrected, especially not in front of family. But we don't like to get all high and mighty about it, you know. Sarah's still just Sarah to us. Just Sarah. I'd heard that phrase my entire life. When I graduated valedictorian from high school, I was just Sarah who got lucky with test taking. When I finished my criminal justice degree summa cum laude, I was just Sarah who always had her nose in a book. When I made detective at 28, youngest in the department's history, I was just Sarah who probably slept her way to the top.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
And now, after 8 years as chief, after transforming a struggling police department into a model of community policing, after being invited to speak at law enforcement conferences across the state, I was still just Sarah to them. But not to Marcus. Marcus was looking at Jake like he'd just announced that gravity was optional, his confusion shifting into something that looked a lot like disgust. "Just Sarah," Marcus repeated, his voice flat. The same Sarah who was featured in Police Chief magazine last month for her innovative community outreach programs. The Sarah who testified before the state legislature about police reform. That Sarah. I stared at him. He'd read the article. He knew about my testimony. My own family hadn't mentioned either of those things when they happened. Jake's face was reddening now, and I could see Ashley approaching from across the room, probably sensing trouble brewing. Mom and Dad were still by the gift table, thankfully out of earshot for the moment. "Look, Marcus," Jake said, his voice taking on that edge he got when he felt challenged. "We're family, okay? We don't need to stroke Sarah's ego every 5 minutes. She knows we're proud of her. Did I know that? When was the last time any of them had said they were proud of me? When was the last time they'd asked about my work, my goals, my life beyond how much overtime I was putting in and whether I'd found a nice man to settle down with yet?" Marcus looked like he wanted to say something else, but I touched his arm gently. This wasn't his fight, and I didn't want him to feel obligated to defend me against my own family. "It's okay," I told him quietly. "This is just how we do things." But even as I said it, I realized how hollow the words sounded. This wasn't okay, this had never been okay. I'd just spent so many years accepting it that I'd forgotten what normal looked like. Ashley reached us then, all smiles and perfume, immediately sliding her arm through Jake's like she was claiming territory. "Sarah, you made it. I wasn't sure you'd be able to get away from work." Another subtle dig. The implication that my job was so demanding, I might not show up for my nephew's birthday party, as if I'd ever missed a family event in my life. "I wouldn't miss Tyler's birthday," I said, holding up the carefully wrapped gift. "Where should I put this?" "Oh, just anywhere," Ashley said with a dismissive wave. "Tyler's gotten so many presents, I don't think he'll even notice." "Won't even notice." The gift I'd spent an hour picking out, the expensive Lego set Tyler had been wanting for months, would go unnoticed in the pile of generic toys and gift cards. Marcus was watching this entire exchange with growing amazement, like he was witnessing some bizarre social experiment. I could practically see him trying to reconcile the family dynamics he was observing with the professional reputation he knew I had. "Chief," he said suddenly, drawing everyone's attention, "I meant to ask you about the new community policing initiative I read about. The one where you're partnering with the schools." I blinked in surprise. Someone actually wanted to hear about my work. At a family gathering. "Oh, that," I said, unsure how to respond. I wasn't used to discussing my professional achievements at Mitchell family events. Usually, any mention of work was met with eye rolls and subject changes. "Yeah, that," Marcus encouraged. "The article said you're the first chief in the county to implement something like that. How's it working out?" Before I could answer, Jake jumped in. "Sarah's always got some project going on. Last month it was bike patrols. This month it's school something or other. She keeps busy. Keeps busy. Like my community policing initiative, which had already led to a 20% reduction in juvenile crime, was just a hobby to pass the time. Actually, I found myself saying, it's been incredibly successful. We've placed officers in all the elementary schools, not as disciplinarians but as mentors and resources. The kids are learning to see police as community helpers rather than authority figures to fear." Marcus nodded enthusiastically. "That's brilliant. I bet it's helping with community relations too." "It is," I continued, warming to the subject despite my family's obvious discomfort. "We've had parents come forward with information about drug dealers in their neighborhoods, because they trust us now. Property crime is down, vandalism is almost non-existent, and the kids love having officer-friendly visits." "That's my sister," Jake said with forced pride, but I could hear the edge in his voice. "Always trying to save the world. Always trying to save the world." Said like it was a character flaw. Ashley checked her phone ostentatiously. "We should probably sing happy birthday soon. Tyler's getting antsy." Translation: enough about Sarah's work, let's get back to what really matters. But Marcus wasn't ready to drop the subject. "Chief, I have to ask, how did you get into law enforcement? It's not exactly a traditional career path for women, especially making it all the way to the top." This was dangerous territory. The story of how I became a police officer wasn't one my family liked to tell, because it made them look bad. But Marcus was asking with genuine interest, and for once, someone actually wanted to hear my story. "I was in college. I began slowly, studying business because that's what my parents thought I should do. But I was volunteering with a victim advocacy group, and I kept seeing the same women come in, battered and afraid, saying the police didn't take them seriously." Jake shifted uncomfortably beside me. He remembered this story, and he knew where it was going. "One night, a woman came in so badly beaten she could barely speak. She said she'd called the police 3 times, and each time they told her it was a domestic matter, and she should try to work it out with her husband." I felt the old anger rising, even after all these years. "She died 2 weeks later. Her husband beat her to death with a baseball bat." Marcus's expression darkened. "Jesus." That's when I decided I wanted to be the kind of police officer who actually helped people. I changed my major, applied to the academy, and never looked back. "That's incredible," Marcus said. "How old were you when you made chief?" 32. He whistled low. "Youngest chief in the county, I bet." "In the state actually," I admitted. Jake made a sound somewhere between a cough and a grunt. "Yeah, well, Sarah always was ambitious." Ambitious. Another word that should have been a compliment, but somehow sounded like an accusation coming from him. "Ambitious enough to turn down offers from bigger departments," I added, feeling a spark of defiance. "I've had 3 different cities try to recruit me in the past 2 years. Detroit offered me twice my current salary." This was news to my family. I could tell by their expression. They had no idea that other places valued my skills enough to try to poach me. "Why didn't you take it?" Marcus asked. "Because this is my community," I said simply. "These are my people. I want to make Riverside Heights the kind of place where kids can ride their bikes without fear, where domestic violence victims know they'll be taken seriously, where everyone feels safe walking to their car at night." Marcus was looking at me with something approaching awe. "That's exactly the kind of leadership this town needs." "Well," Ashley interjected brightly, "Tyler's birthday cake isn't going to cut itself. Sarah, would you mind helping in the kitchen? You know how your mom gets when she's trying to organize things." Just like that, I was dismissed. reduced from police chief giving an interview to family helper needed in the kitchen. The transition was so smooth, so practiced, that I almost didn't notice how expertly they'd just shut down the first real conversation about my work I'd had at a family event in years. But Marcus noticed. I could see it in his face, the way his eyebrows drew together, as he watched Ashley expertly redirect the conversation away from my achievements. Actually, he said I'd love to hear more about the community policing program. Chief, do you have time to grab coffee sometime this week? I might want to recommend some of your strategies to my clients. My clients. Not Jake's friend asking for a favor, but a professional colleague recognizing expertise. I'd be happy to, I replied, and meant it. Jake's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Marcus, you don't need to bother Sarah with work stuff at family events. It's no bother, Marcus said mildly. I'm genuinely interested in her work. Not every day you get to talk shop with someone of Chief Mitchell's caliber. Someone of Chief Mitchell's caliber. When was the last time anyone in my family had described me as being of any particular caliber? When had they ever suggested that my professional opinion might be valuable to someone else? Kitchen, Ashley called out again. More insistently this time. Sarah, we really need you in there. I looked toward the kitchen, then back at Marcus, who was still waiting for an answer about coffee. For the first time in longer than I could remember, someone wanted to continue a conversation about my work instead of ending it. Tuesday morning works for me. I told him. There's a coffee shop downtown, Riverside Roasters. 8:30. Perfect, Marcus said, pulling out his phone to add it to his calendar. I'll bring some questions about implementation strategies. Jake was staring at both of us like we'd started speaking a foreign language. The idea that someone might seek out his sister's professional expertise seemed to genuinely confuse him. As I walked toward the kitchen, I could hear Marcus asking Jake more questions about my work. His tone increasingly incredulous as Jake continued to downplay my achievements. By the time I reached the kitchen door, I could hear Marcus saying something about 20% crime reduction, and Jake responding with, yeah well, crime was already pretty low here anyway. Already pretty low. Like I'd inherited some kind of crime-free paradise instead of a department demoralized by corruption scandals. And a community that had lost faith in law enforcement entirely. In the kitchen, Mom was indeed struggling with party logistics, but not in the way Ashley had implied. She was perfectly capable of cutting a cake and organizing gift opening. What she was struggling with was the fact that Tyler had asked 3 times when Aunt Sarah was going to arrive. And she hadn't known what to tell him. There you are, Mom said when she saw me. Tyler's been asking for you. I think he wants to open your gift first. My heart squeezed. Tyler wanted to open my gift first. When was the last time someone had been excited to see what I'd brought them? He's a good kid, I said, setting Tyler's gift on the counter while Mom finished with the cake. He is, Mom agreed. Jake and Ashley are doing a good job with him. She paused, glancing toward the door to make sure we weren't overheard. That friend of Jake seems nice. Marcus. He seems like it, I replied carefully. He certainly seems to think highly of you. Mom continued, her tone neutral but probing. Kept calling you Chief this. Chief that. I waited for the criticism, the reminder that family was more important than titles. The suggestion that I was getting too big for my britches. Instead, Mom surprised me. I saw an article about you in the paper last week. She said quietly. About that testimony you gave to the state legislature. I froze. She'd seen the article. You did. Mom was focused intently on the cake, not meeting my eyes. Someday. Potent. Police reform and all that. It was important, I said carefully. She nodded, still not looking at me. Your father and I, we don't always understand what you do. Your job, I mean. It seems so. She gestured vaguely with the cake knife. Dangerous. I supplied. Complicated, she corrected. When you were little, you wanted to be a veterinarian. That seems simpler somehow. I remembered, I'd wanted to be a veterinarian. Until I was 12, when our neighbor's dog got hit by a car, and the vet couldn't save him. I'd decided then, that I didn't want a job where I'd have to tell people their loved ones were gone. Ironic. Considering how much of my current job involved exactly that. Mom, I started, unsure what I wanted to say. She finally looked at me then. Really looked at me. And for a moment, I saw something in her eyes I couldn't quite identify. Pride, maybe, or regret. You turned out different than we expected, she said finally. Just different. Is that bad? I asked. She considered this for a long moment. I don't know, she said honestly. Sometimes I think we don't know how to talk to you anymore. You're so accomplished. It makes the rest of us feel small. The rest of us feel small. There it was. The truth I'd been dancing around my entire adult life. My success made them uncomfortable because it highlighted their own perceived failures. My achievements weren't celebrated because they felt like accusations. That was never my intention, I said quietly. I know, Mom replied. But intention and impact aren't always the same thing. Are they? Before I could respond, Ashley burst through the kitchen door like she was being chased. What's taking so long? She demanded. Tyler's about to have a meltdown, and your friend Marcus is asking Jake all sorts of questions about Sarah's job that he can't answer. Can't answer. Because Jake had never bothered to learn what I actually did for a living beyond the most basic facts. Mom said, lifting the cake. Sarah, grab the plates. As we returned to the main room, I could see Marcus and Jake standing near the gift table, their conversation looking increasingly strained. Marcus seemed to be explaining something while Jake nodded along with the expression of someone who had no idea what was being discussed. Tyler spotted the cake and let out a whoop of excitement, but his eyes found me immediately. Aunt Sarah, did you bring me something? Of course I did, buddy, I said, ruffling his hair. Happy 12th birthday. Can I open yours first? He asked, bouncing on his toes. I felt every adult in the room tense slightly. Gift opening had a protocol in the Mitchell family, and deviating from it usually caused drama. But Tyler was the birthday boy, and surely he got to choose the order. If that's what you want, I said. Tyler grabbed my carefully wrapped package and tore into it with the enthusiasm only a 12-year-old could muster. When he saw the Lego set inside, his face lit up like Christmas morning. The creator expert detective's office. He shrieked. Mom, look, it's the one with the pool hall and the barber shop and everything. Ashley forced a smile. That's nice, honey. Very expensive looking. Very expensive looking. Code for Sarah's showing off again. But Tyler didn't care about adult politics. He threw his arms around my waist and squeezed tight. This is the best present ever. Will you help me build it? Absolutely. I promised. Marcus appeared at my elbow. That's the modular building series, right? Those are incredible. My nephew has the fire station. Tyler's been wanting this one for months, I explained. He's really into architecture and engineering. Smart kid, Marcus said approvingly. Just like his aunt. Jake overheard and made his way over, clearly feeling left out of the conversation about his own son. Yeah, Tyler's always been good with building things, he said. Gets it from his old man. I guess. Marcus looked between Jake and Tyler, then at the Lego set. Actually, architectural interest usually indicates strong spatial reasoning and mathematical aptitude. Tyler, are you good at math? Tyler nodded enthusiastically. I'm in advanced math at school, and I want to be an architect when I grow up, or maybe a police officer like Aunt Sarah. The silence that followed was deafening. Tyler had just announced, in front of the entire family, that he wanted to follow in my footsteps rather than his father's. Jake's face went through several color changes before settling on a forced smile. Well, you've got plenty of time to decide, buddy. But Marcus was grinning. Both excellent career choices. Architecture and law enforcement both require problem-solving skills, attention to detail, and the ability to work with people. Very smart thinking, Tyler. I could see Jake struggling with the fact that his 12-year-old son was receiving more respect for his career aspirations than Jake had shown for my actual career achievements. We should probably sing happy birthday, Ashley interjected, her voice tight with strain. As the family gathered around Tyler and began the familiar song, I found myself standing slightly apart from the group, watching the scene with new eyes. Marcus positioned himself next to me, and I realized that for the first time at a family gathering, I didn't feel completely alone. When the song ended, and Tyler began blowing out candles, Marcus leaned over and said quietly, That kid's got good taste in role models. I looked at him in surprise. What do you mean? He wants to be like his. Marcus said simply. Kid's got excellent judgment. Excellent judgment. For wanting to be like me. As Tyler finished opening his other gifts, most of which paled in comparison to the Lego set both in thoughtfulness and Tyler's enthusiasm, I started to see the afternoon differently. Yes, my family had made me park 3 blocks away. Yes, they'd spent the day minimizing my achievements and redirecting conversations away from my work. Yes, they'd treated me like just Sarah, instead of Chief Mitchell. But Marcus had seen it all, and his reaction had been one of genuine confusion and growing disapproval. He couldn't understand why anyone would treat the town's police chief with such casual disrespect. Because in his world, achievement was recognized and competence was valued. Maybe the problem wasn't that I was too proud of my accomplishment. Maybe the problem was that my family was threatened by them. As the party wound down and people began cleaning up, Marcus approached me one more time. Chief, I hope I didn't overstep earlier, he said. With the questions about your work and not at all, I assured him. It was nice to have someone actually interested in what I do. He shook his head slowly. I have to be honest, I don't understand your family's attitude. Where I come from, when someone achieves what you've achieved, the family brags about it to anyone who'll listen. Where he came from, a place where success was celebrated instead of minimized. It's complicated. I said again, but the words felt even more hollow than they had earlier. Maybe Marcus said. Or maybe it's simpler than you think. He handed me his business card. I'm looking forward to our coffee meeting on Tuesday. I have a feeling I'm going to learn a lot. As I walked back to my car, 3 blocks away from the community center where my family was probably already gossiping about my attitude and Marcus's inappropriate questions, I realized something had shifted inside me. For 35 years, I'd accepted their version of reality. I was just Sarah, someone who needed to be kept humble, whose achievements were somehow threatening to family harmony. I'd parked 3 blocks away because they told me to. I'd downplayed my successes because they were uncomfortable with them. I'd allowed myself to be minimized because keeping the peace seemed more important than demanding respect. But Marcus's genuine confusion had shown me how abnormal this really was. His questions had reminded me that my work mattered, that my achievements were significant, that my expertise was valuable to people who actually understood what I did. As I reached my car, parked in the spot they'd assigned me like I was some kind of second-class family member, I made a decision. This was the last time I would park 3 blocks away. This was the last time I would accept being treated as just Sarah, when I'd earned the right to be called Chief Mitchell. This was the last time I would allow my family's discomfort with my success to dictate how I saw myself. Tomorrow I would start making some changes. And it would begin with that coffee meeting with Marcus, where for the first time in years, someone would ask me about my work because they valued my expertise, not because they were looking for ways to diminish it. The walk back to my car didn't feel quite as long this time. Maybe because I knew it would be my last. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything feel possible. I found myself arriving at Riverside Roasters 15 minutes
early, something that would have horrified my family. They'd always made a point of telling me that punctuality was just another way of showing off, another sign that I thought I was better than everyone else. But sitting in the quiet coffee shop, watching the morning light stream through the windows, I realized I wasn't early because I was trying to impress anyone. I was early because I was looking forward to this conversation. Marcus arrived exactly at 8:30, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing the kind of focused expression that told me he'd actually prepared for this meeting. Not the casual let's grab coffee and chat approach my family would have taken, but the respectful preparation of someone who valued my time and expertise. Chief Mitchell, he said, extending his hand for a firm shake. Thank you for making time for this. Please call me Sarah, I said, then immediately wondered why I'd said that. At work I insisted on proper titles. It maintained respect and authority. But something about Marcus made me want to blur the lines between professional and personal, maybe because he was the first person in years who seemed to respect both versions of me. Sarah it is, he agreed, settling into the chair across from me. I have to start by saying I've done some research since Sunday, and I'm even more impressed than I was at the party. Research. He'd actually looked into my background, my achievements, my work. When was the last time anyone in my family had shown that level of interest in my career? What kind of research? I asked, curious despite myself. Marcus opened his portfolio and pulled out several printed articles. The piece in Police Chief magazine about your community policing initiative. The feature in Law Enforcement Today about your crisis intervention training program. The state legislature testimony transcript about police reform. He paused, looking at me seriously. Sarah, you're not just successful, you're innovative. You're changing how law enforcement works in communities like this. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. I'm just trying to do my job well. No, Marcus said firmly. You're redefining what the job should be. There's a difference. He leaned forward, his expression intense. The crisis intervention program alone has reduced police-involved shootings in your jurisdiction by 60% over 3 years. Do you understand how remarkable that is? 60%. I knew the statistics, of course, but hearing them repeated by someone who understood their significance felt different. At home, those numbers were just more proof that I was obsessed with work. Here with Marcus, they were validation that the long hours and difficult decisions were actually making a difference. It wasn't just me, I said automatically. I had an entire team working on that program. A team you assembled, trained, and led, Marcus countered. Sarah, I've worked in security for 15 years. I've seen departments 3 times your size with half your success rate. What you've accomplished here isn't luck or circumstance. It's leadership. Leadership. The word hit me unexpectedly hard, because it was something my family had never acknowledged about me. In their eyes, I was just stubborn Sarah who refused to quit when things got difficult. They'd never seen my persistence as leadership, my attention to detail as thoroughness, my commitment to excellence as anything other than an inability to relax. Tell me about the resistance, Marcus said, pulling me back to the conversation. These kinds of changes don't happen without pushback. How did you handle the officers who didn't want to adapt? The question surprised me with its sophistication. Marcus understood that implementing change in law enforcement wasn't just about having good ideas. It was about managing personalities, overcoming institutional inertia, and sometimes making unpopular decisions for the greater good. The first year was brutal, I admitted. I had officers who'd been doing things the same way for 20 years telling me that community policing was soft and crisis intervention training was touchy-feely nonsense. I had city council members questioning whether a woman could really handle the tough decisions. I had community leaders who thought I was too young and inexperienced to understand their neighborhoods. Marcus nodded, taking notes. How did you win them over? Results, I said simply. I couldn't argue with their feelings or their preconceptions, but I could show them outcomes. When domestic violence calls stopped escalating into assaults because our officers knew how to de-escalate situations, the old-timers started paying attention. When property crime dropped because kids in the community started trusting police enough to report suspicious activity, the city council stopped questioning my methods. And the community leaders? I smiled, remembering. I spent 6 months attending every neighborhood association meeting, every church council session, every community event. I didn't go as the police chief making announcements. I went as someone who wanted to listen and learn. I asked what problems they were seeing, what solutions they thought might work, how the police department could better serve their needs. Brilliant, Marcus murmured, still writing. You made them partners instead of adversaries. Partners instead of adversaries. It was such a simple way to describe what had felt like the most challenging part of my career, but Marcus was right. That's exactly what I'd done, and somehow my family had never understood the significance of it. The hardest part wasn't changing policies or procedures, I continued, feeling more comfortable as the conversation progressed. It was changing the culture, getting officers to see themselves as guardians instead of warriors. Teaching them that strength isn't about intimidation, it's about earning respect through competence and fairness. Marcus looked up from his notes. That had to be especially challenging as a woman in a male-dominated field. The observation hung between us, and I realized this was the first time anyone had ever acknowledged that part of my journey. My family certainly never talked about the additional obstacles I'd faced because of my gender. In their minds, any discrimination I'd experienced was either imagined or my own fault for choosing such an inappropriate career. It was, I said honestly, I had to be twice as prepared for every meeting, twice as knowledgeable about every policy, twice as calm in every crisis. I couldn't show uncertainty or vulnerability because there were people waiting for me to fail so they could say women weren't cut out for leadership in law enforcement. But you succeeded anyway, Marcus pointed out. I succeeded because I refused to accept that their limitations should become mine, I replied, and as I said it, I realized the truth of it. Every time someone told me I couldn't do something because I was too young, too female, too inexperienced, I used it as motivation to prove them wrong. Marcus was quiet for a moment, studying my face. Sarah, can I ask you something personal? I nodded, though I felt my defenses rise slightly. Your family, he began carefully. At the party on Sunday, I got the impression they don't really understand what you've accomplished. Is that accurate? The question I'd been dreading and hoping for simultaneously. Someone had finally noticed the disconnect between who I was professionally and how my family treated me. They think I've gotten too big for my britches, I said, borrowing my mother's favorite phrase. Success makes them uncomfortable because they interpret it as judgment of their choices. But that's not your intention, Marcus said. It wasn't a question. No, it's not. But intention doesn't seem to matter. Every promotion I've received, every award I've won, every article written about my work, feels like evidence to them that I think I'm better than they are. Marcus frowned. Are they not proud of you? The question hit me like a physical blow, because it forced me to confront something I'd been avoiding for years. When was the last time my family had expressed pride in my achievements? When had they ever celebrated my successes without immediately deflating them with comments about staying humble or remembering where I came from? I don't think they know how to be proud of me, I said finally. My success doesn't fit into their understanding of who I'm supposed to be. Who are you supposed to be? Just Sarah. The daughter who helps in the kitchen, who remembers everyone's birthdays, who doesn't make waves or ask for special treatment. The one who's successful enough to help when they need money, but not so successful that it makes them feel inadequate. Marcus set down his pen and looked at me directly. Sarah, that's not family support, that's emotional manipulation. Emotional manipulation, the words hit me like cold water, shocking and clarifying at the same time. I'd never thought of it that way, but he was right. My family's approach to my success was designed to keep me in a box that served their comfort rather than celebrating who I'd become. They're not malicious about it, I said, feeling the need to defend them even as I recognized the truth in his assessment. Intent doesn't negate impact, Marcus replied gently. You've achieved something extraordinary, and instead of being your biggest supporters, they're treating you like your success is a problem to be managed. We sat in silence for a moment while I processed this. Outside the coffee shop, Riverside Heights was waking up. Business owners unlocking their doors, commuters heading to work, school buses beginning their routes through neighborhoods where my officers would soon be starting their community patrols. This was my town, these were my people, and I'd made it safer and more connected through years of hard work and innovation. But none of that seemed to matter when I walked into my parents' house. The parking thing really bothered me, Marcus said suddenly.
What?
Making you park 3 blocks away. It was such a deliberate act of disrespect, and they did it so casually, like diminishing you was just normal family behavior. Normal family behavior, that's exactly what it had felt like to me, which is why Marcus's reaction had been so jarring. He'd seen it as abnormal, disrespectful, wrong. I'd seen it as just another Tuesday in the Mitchell family dynamic. They've always done things like that, I admitted. Little ways of reminding me not to get too comfortable with my success. Sarah, healthy families celebrate each other's achievements. They don't spend energy cutting successful members down to size. Healthy families. Did I even know what that looked like? My entire adult life had been spent managing my family's discomfort with my choices, trying to minimize my accomplishments, so they wouldn't feel threatened, walking on eggshells to avoid triggering their insecurities about their own lives. I've been thinking about Sunday since we talked, Marcus continued. About how differently you acted at the party versus how you are right now. What do you mean? At the party, you seemed smaller somehow. Like you were trying to take up less space, be less noticeable. But sitting here, talking about your work, you're completely different. You're confident, articulate, passionate. You're the person I expected to meet when I heard I was going to have coffee with the chief of police. He was right. At family gatherings I did try to make myself smaller. I downplayed my achievements, deflected attention from my work, and focused on being helpful rather than impressive. I'd learned that being too much myself made everyone else uncomfortable. It's exhausting, I said quietly, admitting something I'd never said out loud. constantly monitoring myself to make sure I don't accidentally seem too proud or too successful. Always being ready to deflect compliments or change the subject when someone asks about work. That's not how you should have to live, Marcus said firmly. Especially not with people who claim to love you. People who claim to love you. The phrasing was deliberate, and I caught the implication. Love that came with conditions, that required me to diminish myself for others' comfort, wasn't really love at all. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and saw it was from Jake. Mom wants to know if you can help move furniture this weekend. Dad's back is acting up again. I showed Marcus the message. Perfect timing, I said wryly. He read it and shook his head. Let me guess. They need your help, but they don't want to acknowledge that you're successful enough to afford movers. Bingo. I'm strong enough to move furniture but not accomplished enough to be treated with respect. Are you going to do it? The question caught me off guard. Of course I was going to help. I always helped. That's what I did in the Mitchell family. I showed up when needed, and asked for nothing in return. But as I sat there, looking at Marcus's expectant face, I realized I didn't have to do it. I could say no. I could set boundaries. I could refuse to be taken for granted just because I'd always been available before. I don't know, I said honestly. I've never said no to a family request before. Maybe it's time to start, Marcus suggested gently. Maybe it was time to start. The thought was both terrifying and liberating. Part 3. The initial response. I stared at Jake's text message for a long moment, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. In the past I would have immediately responded with of course, what time, without even checking my own schedule. But sitting across from Marcus, having just articulated how exhausting it was to constantly diminish myself for my family's comfort, the automatic response felt wrong. What are you thinking? Marcus asked, clearly noticing my hesitation. I'm thinking that I have a choice here, I said slowly. I can continue being the Sarah who drops everything whenever they need something, or I can start being the Sarah who expects the same respect they'd give any other accomplished adult. What would respect look like in this situation? I considered the question. Maybe asking instead of assuming. Maybe acknowledging that my time has value. Maybe recognizing that I have my own life and responsibilities. Have they ever done that? I scrolled back through my text history with Jake, looking at months of similar messaging. Can you pick up Tyler from practice? Mom needs you to drive her to the doctor. Dad's computer is acting up again. Ashley's car won't start. Can you give her a ride? Never a please, or if you have time, or I know you're busy, but just assumptions that I would be available and willing. No, I said finally. They haven't, Marcus nodded thoughtfully. So this could be an opportunity to establish a new pattern. A new pattern. The phrase resonated with me because it suggested that change was possible, that I wasn't locked into the role I'd always played in my family's dysfunction. I typed a response. Hi Jake, I'll need to check my schedule and get back to you. What time were you thinking, and how many hours of work is involved? It was a simple message, but sending it felt revolutionary. I was treating their request like any other professional or personal commitment that required planning and consideration. Marcus watched me send the text and smiled. How does that feel? Terrifying, I admitted. And surprisingly good. My phone buzzed almost immediately with Jake's response. It's just moving some furniture. Shouldn't take long. Mom thought you could come over Saturday morning. The multiple question marks and the dismissive tone told me everything I needed to know about how he'd received my boundary-setting attempt. I showed Marcus the message. Just moving furniture, he read aloud. Shouldn't take long. Notice how he's minimizing the request now that you've suggested it might be an inconvenience. I did notice. Jake was employing a classic manipulation tactic. Make the person feel unreasonable for having boundaries by suggesting their concerns were overblown. And Mom thought you could come over, I added. Not we were hoping you could help, or would you be available? They've already decided I'm doing it. Exactly, they're not asking for help, they're informing you of your assignment. That's exactly what it felt like, and probably what it had always been. I wasn't a daughter being asked to help her family, I was an employee being given tasks to complete. I typed another response. I have plans Saturday morning. I could help Sunday afternoon, for 2 to 3 hours if that works. This time the response took longer to come, and when it did, I could feel Jake's irritation through the screen. What plans? You never have weekend plans. Marcus read the message over my shoulder and whistled low. Wow, he's not even pretending to respect your autonomy anymore. What do you mean? He's demanding to know what your plans are, as if he has the right to approve or disapprove of how you spend your time. And that comment about you never having weekend plans. That's designed to make you feel guilty for having a life outside of their needs. I'd never thought about it that way, but Marcus was right. Jake's response assumed he had the authority to question my schedule and judge whether my other commitments were valid. The truth is, I don't have specific plans Saturday morning, I admitted. I just wanted to keep that time for myself. That's a perfectly valid reason to say no, Marcus said firmly. You don't owe anyone an explanation for wanting downtime. You're the chief of police. For crying out loud, you work 50-hour weeks dealing with life and death situations. If you want to spend Saturday morning drinking coffee and reading a book, that's not just reasonable, it's necessary for your mental health. Coffee and reading a book. Such a simple pleasure, but one I rarely allowed myself, because there was always some family crisis or obligation that took precedence. I can't remember the last time I had a Saturday morning to myself, I realized. When was your last real vacation? Marcus asked. I had to think about it. 2 years ago, I took a long weekend to visit a friend in Chicago. What happened? Dad had a minor car accident on Friday. And I spent the whole weekend on the phone dealing with insurance companies and making sure he got to his doctor's appointment. Marcus stared at me. You cut your vacation short for a minor car accident. Well, Mom was overwhelmed, and Jake was working, and Ashley doesn't drive well in the city. Sarah, Marcus interrupted gently. Your father had a minor car accident. Not a major medical emergency, not a life-threatening crisis. A minor car accident that dozens of competent adults deal with every day without requiring their police chief daughter to cancel her vacation. When he put it like that, it did sound ridiculous. But at the time, it had felt like the natural thing to do. My family needed me, so I came home. They've trained you to believe that their minor inconveniences are your major emergencies, Marcus continued. That their inability to handle normal adult responsibilities becomes your problem to solve. Trained me. The word choice was deliberate and accurate. Over the years, my family had systematically conditioned me to prioritize their needs over my own, to feel guilty for having boundaries, to see my success as a resource for them to exploit rather than an achievement to celebrate. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a group text that included Mom, Jake, Ashley, and me. Sarah, Jake says you're being difficult about helping this weekend. We really need you. Dad's back is acting up, and we can't afford movers. I felt the familiar surge of guilt and obligation, the automatic impulse to apologize, and agree to whatever they needed. But I also felt something new. Anger at being labeled difficult for having the audacity to suggest that my time had value. Group text manipulation. Marcus observed, reading over my shoulder again. Now you're not just disappointing Jake, you're letting down the whole family, and they're bringing up your dad's health and their financial situation to make you feel guilty for having boundaries. Is that what this is? I asked. Manipulation. Sarah, look at the pattern. They make unreasonable demands on your time. When you try to set boundaries, they escalate by questioning your motives, minimizing your concerns, and recruiting other family members to pressure you. They use guilt, obligation, and emotional blackmail to get what they want. What would you call it? I would call it manipulation. I would call it emotional abuse. I would call it a dysfunctional family system that had taught me to believe that my worth was measured by my usefulness to others. But admitting that felt like betraying the people who'd raised me, loved me, and been there for me through the important moments of my life. Except, had they been there for me? When I graduated from the police academy, Mom had spent the ceremony complaining about the hard seats. When I was promoted to detective, Dad had asked when I was going to find a real job with normal hours. When I became chief, the family dinner conversation had focused on Ashley's new haircut and Tyler's soccer season. They haven't been there for me, I said quietly, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. I keep thinking about all the times they've been there, but when I really examine it, I'm the one who's always been there for them. Marcus nodded sadly. It's common in dysfunctional family systems. The successful responsible member becomes the emotional and financial safety net for everyone else, but their own needs and achievements are minimized or ignored. I thought about the past year alone. I'd helped Jake with his rent when his hours were cut. I'd paid for Tyler's summer camp when they couldn't afford it. I'd driven Mom to medical appointments, picked up Tyler from school when Ashley was running late, and spent countless evenings troubleshooting Dad's technology problems. But when I'd been recognized as Officer of the Year by the State Police Association, none of them had attended the ceremony. They said they were busy. I remembered aloud. What were they busy with? Jake had a poker game. Ashley was getting her nails done. Mom and Dad were watching a movie. Marcus was quiet for a moment, letting the significance of that sink in. A poker game, a nail appointment, and a movie had taken priority over celebrating my professional achievement. Sarah, when people love and respect you, they make time for your important moments. They don't treat your successes as inconveniences to be endured. My phone buzzed with another message, this time just from Mom. Honey, I don't understand why you're being so stubborn about this. We're family.
Family.
Family helps family. The phrase I'd heard my entire life always applied to what I should do for them, never what they should do for me. I showed Marcus the message. The funny thing is, she's right. Family should help family, but somehow it's only expected to flow in one direction. Have you ever asked them for help? The question surprised me. No, I guess not. Why not? I thought about it. Because they'd either say no, or make it such a drama that it wouldn't be worth it. It's easier to just handle things myself. So you've learned not to expect support from them, but they've learned to expect unlimited support from you. Unlimited support. That's exactly what it was. No matter what I had going on in my life, no matter how tired or stressed or overwhelmed I was expected to be available whenever they needed something. This has to stop, I said, surprising myself, with the firmness in my voice. What has to stop? All of it. The automatic yes to every request. The guilt trips when I try to set boundaries. The assumption that my time and energy are infinitely available to solve their problems. I looked at Marcus, feeling something shift inside me. I'm done being their unpaid employee. Marcus smiled. What are you going to do? I looked at my phone, at the group text waiting for a response, at the guilt and manipulation disguised as family love. Then I typed a message that felt both terrifying and liberating. I won't be able to help with furniture moving this weekend. I suggest calling a moving company, or asking some of Jake's friends. Going forward, I'll need more notice for requests like this so I can plan accordingly. I hit send before I could lose my nerve. The response was immediate and explosive. My phone started buzzing with individual messages from each family member, ranging from confused to angry to wounded. But for the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel the overwhelming need to apologize and fix their upset feelings. How does it feel? Marcus asked. Like I just jumped off a cliff. I admitted. But also like I might actually learn to fly. Part 4. The false return. The fallout from my furniture moving refusal lasted exactly 36 hours before they tried a different approach. I was in my office Friday afternoon, reviewing budget proposals for the next fiscal year, when my secretary knocked on my door. Chief Mitchell, your mother is here to see you. I looked up from the spreadsheets, surprised. Mom had never visited me at work before. In 8 years as chief, she'd never once set foot in the police station. She claimed it made her nervous to be around so many officers, as if my workplace was somehow threatening rather than safe. Send her in, I said quickly, saving my documents and clearing my desk of sensitive materials. Mom appeared in my doorway, looking uncharacteristically hesitant. She was dressed in her best blouse and slacks, the outfit she usually reserved for church or medical appointments, and she was carrying a small gift bag. Sarah, honey, she said, hovering near the entrance like she wasn't sure she was allowed to come in. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Not at all, I replied, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. This is a nice surprise. What brings you here? She settled into the chair, looking around my office with obvious curiosity. It was a good office, spacious and well-appointed, with my diplomas and commendations on the wall, professional photos with city officials and law enforcement leaders, and a large window overlooking the town square. Physical evidence of my success and competence, things she'd never seen before. Your office is lovely, she said, sounding genuinely impressed. Very professional. Thank you. I waited for her to explain her visit, but she seemed to be struggling with how to begin. Finally, she held out the gift bag. I brought you something. Just a little token of appreciation. I accepted the bag warily. Mom wasn't usually the spontaneous gift-giving type, especially not in the middle of a week, when we'd just had our first real conflict in years. Inside was a coffee mug with "World's Best Daughter" printed on the side, along with a package of expensive coffee beans and a handwritten note that read, "We're so proud of everything you've accomplished. Love, Mom and Dad." I stared at the note, trying to process this sudden shift from guilt trips to appreciation. The timing was too convenient to be coincidental. "Mom," I said carefully, "this is very thoughtful, but I have to ask, is this about the furniture situation?" Her face immediately shifted into an expression of wounded innocence. It can't a mother bring her daughter a gift without ulterior motive? Of course she can, I replied. The timing seems significant. Mom sighed heavily, the kind of dramatic exhale she'd perfected over decades of family interactions. "Sarah, I think there's been a misunderstanding about this weekend." "What kind
of misunderstanding?" "Well, when Jake said you were being difficult, I think he might have misrepresented the situation. We weren't trying to impose on you or take your time for granted." I noticed the careful phrasing. She was blaming Jake for the misunderstanding, while simultaneously suggesting that my interpretation of events was incorrect. "Mom, I got a group text that called me difficult for having other plans. How should I have interpreted that?" "You know how Jake is," she said with a dismissive wave. "He gets frustrated when things don't go smoothly, and he doesn't always express himself well. We're not upset with you for having plans. We're just disappointed that we can't find a time that works for everyone. We can't find a time that works for everyone." As if this was a mutual scheduling problem rather than them expecting me to drop everything on their timeline. "What exactly needs to be moved?" I asked. "Oh, just a few pieces. Dad's old dresser from the basement to the guest room, and the dining room table to make space for the new one we bought. A few pieces." I happened to know Dad's dresser was a solid oak monstrosity that had taken 4 grown men to get into the basement originally, and their dining room table was a heavy antique that seated 8 people. "That sounds like more than a few hours of work," I observed. "Well, maybe a little more than we initially thought," Mom admitted. "But you're so strong and capable, and you know how Dad's back has been lately." Strong and capable. Translation: you're useful for manual labor. And there was the guilt trip about Dad's back, right on schedule. "Mom, have you considered hiring professional movers? They have the right equipment and experience for heavy furniture." "Oh, honey, you know we can't afford that right now. Money's been tight since Dad's hours were reduced." I knew for a fact that wasn't true. Dad was retired and receiving both his pension and Social Security. Jake had mentioned just last month that they'd bought the new dining room table, and I'd seen Mom's Facebook photos from their recent weekend trip to the casino. But somehow, when it came to asking me for free labor, they were suddenly financially strapped. "What about Jake's friends?" I suggested. "I'm sure some of them would be willing to help for pizza and beer." Mom's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Well, you know how unreliable his friends can be. And they don't care about our furniture the way family does. They don't care about our furniture the way family does." The implication being that if I truly cared about my family, I would prioritize their furniture over my own time and boundaries. "Mom," I said gently, "I care about you and Dad very much. But caring about family doesn't mean being available for manual labor whenever it's convenient for you." "It's not about convenience," she protested. "It's about helping each other. That's what families do." "You're right," I agreed. "Families do help each other, but help should be reciprocal and respectful. It shouldn't involve guilt trips when someone isn't available, and it shouldn't assume that one person's time is less valuable than everyone else's." Mom's face was shifting through a series of expressions: confusion, hurt, and something that looked like panic. She clearly hadn't expected me to articulate the problem so directly. "Sarah, I don't understand where this is coming from. We've never treated your time as less valuable." I thought about all the times I'd rearranged my schedule for family needs. The crime scene I'd left early because Mom needed a ride to the grocery store. The department meetings I'd moved because Tyler had a school event. The vacation I'd cut short for Dad's minor car accident. "Mom, when's the last time you asked about my schedule before making plans that involved me?" She was quiet for a long moment, clearly trying to think of an example. "Well, we always check to make sure you're not working." "That's not the same thing. Checking to make sure I'm not at work isn't the same as respecting that I might have other plans or commitments." "But you never have other plans," she said.
echoing Jake's text from earlier in the week. Maybe because I've learned not to make them, knowing that family obligations always take priority. The words hung in the air between us, and I could see Mom processing this perspective for the first time. She'd never considered that my constant availability might be a choice I'd made rather than a natural state of being. I didn't realize, she said quietly. I know you didn't, and I'm not trying to punish anyone or be difficult. I'm just asking for the same consideration you'd give any other adult whose time you valued. Mom was quiet for several minutes, looking around my office again. Her gaze lingered on the photos of me with other law enforcement officials, the certificates of achievement, the evidence of a life and career she'd never really tried to understand. You really have accomplished a lot, she said finally. I have. We're proud of you, you know. Even if we don't always show it the right way. It was the closest thing to an acknowledgement I'd ever received from her, and I felt something loosen in my chest. I know you love me, Mom. But love and pride need to be expressed in ways that actually feel loving and prideful to the person receiving them. She nodded slowly. Maybe we haven't been very good at that. Maybe not, but it's not too late to change. We sat in comfortable silence for a few moments. Then Mom reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. I'm going to call that moving company, she said. The one that did the Henderson's kitchen renovation. Do you happen to know their number? I did know their number, because I'd used them 2 years ago when I'd moved into my current house. But this was the first time anyone in my family had asked me about my own moving experience, my own adult decisions and knowledge. I'll text it to you, I said. They're very professional and reasonably priced. Thank you. Mom stood up, then hesitated. Sarah, would you like to come to dinner Sunday? Just family, no agenda, no furniture moving. I'll make your favorite pot roast. It was an olive branch, and I recognized it as such. But I also recognized that accepting it would signal that everything was back to normal, that our conversation hadn't really changed anything fundamental about our relationship. I'd like that, I said carefully. But I want to be clear about something. If this is an attempt to smooth things over so we can go back to the way things were, it's not going to work. I meant what I said about needing more respect for my time and boundaries. Mom nodded. I understand, this isn't about going back to anything. It's about moving forward. Moving forward. I liked the sound of that. After she left, I sat in my office thinking about the conversation. It had been progress. Real progress, but I was also aware that one talk wasn't going to undo 35 years of established patterns. Change would require consistent reinforcement, ongoing boundary setting, and probably more difficult conversations. But for the first time in years, I felt like my family might actually be capable of seeing me as more than just a resource to be tapped when convenient. Mom had come to my office, seen evidence of my professional life, and started a conversation about respect and boundaries. It wasn't everything, but it was a beginning. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Mom said you're not helping this weekend, because we didn't ask nicely enough. Is that really what this is about? I read the message twice, noting how he'd interpreted our boundary-setting conversation as a complaint about politeness, rather than a request for basic respect. Some things, apparently, would take longer to change than others. I typed back, it's about mutual respect and valuing each other's time. We can talk more about this at dinner Sunday if you want. I hit send and immediately regretted engaging at all. Jake's question wasn't really a question. It was an attempt to reframe the conversation in terms that made me look petty and unreasonable. But I'd responded instinctively, still caught in the old pattern of trying to explain myself and justify my boundaries. The response came quickly. Fine. But this whole thing seems like a lot of drama over moving some furniture. Drama. There it was, the word designed to make me feel like I was overreacting, like my request for basic consideration was somehow excessive and unreasonable. It was a masterful manipulation tactic, and I felt myself wanting to apologize, to explain that I wasn't trying to cause drama, that I just wanted to be treated with respect. Instead, I put my phone in my desk drawer, and turned back to my budget proposals. Whatever Jake thought about my drama, I had a police department to run and a community to serve. People who actually valued my expertise and respected my authority. The irony wasn't lost on me that strangers treated me with more professional courtesy than my own family did. Part 5. The truth extraction Sunday dinner at my parents' house had always been a carefully choreographed affair, with Mom orchestrating the meal preparation and Dad holding court from his recliner until we were called to eat. But this particular Sunday felt different from the moment I walked through the front door. For starters, I'd parked in the driveway instead of on the street 3 blocks away. It was a small act of rebellion, but it felt significant as I walked up the front steps carrying a bottle of wine and a sense of determination I'd never brought to a family dinner before. Mom greeted me at the door with what seemed like genuine warmth, taking the wine and commenting on what a nice selection it was. Usually my contributions to family meals were acknowledged with a perfunctory thank you before being set aside in favor of whatever Mom had already planned. "The pot roast smells amazing," I said, following her into the kitchen. "It's your grandmother's recipe," Mom replied, stirring something on the stove. "I thought you might want the recipe card. You know, for when you have your own family dinners someday." The comment was loaded with the usual implications about my single status and lack of children, but the tone was gentler than usual. It felt more like hopefulness than criticism, which was progress of a sort. Jake and Ashley were already in the living room with Tyler, who bounded over to me the moment he saw me. "Aunt Sarah, did you see the castle I built with the Lego set you gave me?" "I'd love to see it," I said, allowing him to pull me toward the coffee table where an impressive architectural creation dominated the surface. "It has a working drawbridge and secret passages," Tyler explained excitedly. "And I'm going to add a police station next to it because you said you'd help me with that part." I had promised to help him with a police station addition, but I'd completely forgotten in the chaos of the week. The fact that Tyler remembered and was excited about it made me realize how rarely I followed through on the personal promises I made to family members, usually because some other family crisis took precedence. "We'll definitely work on that," I said. "Meaning it. Maybe next weekend." "Really, even though you're busy being the police chief?" The question was innocent, but it highlighted something that bothered me. Tyler clearly understood that I had an important job, but somehow the adults in his life had taught him to see it as something that competed with family time rather than something to be proud of. "Being the police chief is important," I said, settling down beside him to examine his castle more closely. "But spending time with you is important too. Good leaders know how to balance their responsibilities." Tyler beamed at this, and I caught Ashley watching us with an expression I couldn't quite read. It might have been appreciation for the attention I was giving her son, or it might have been discomfort with the leadership lesson I was inadvertently teaching him. Jake was scrolling through his phone, deliberately ignoring the conversation, which told me he was still sulking about the furniture situation. His passive-aggressive silence was a familiar family dynamic, designed to make everyone else feel guilty for whatever perceived slight he was nursing. "Jake," I said directly, "are you planning to participate in dinner conversation, or should we work around your mood?" The directness of the question clearly surprised him. Usually family members would tiptoe around his sulking until he decided to rejoin the group on his own terms. "I'm not in a mood," he said defensively. "You've been staring at your phone since I got here and haven't said a word to anyone. If you're upset about something, maybe we should address it directly instead of letting it affect everyone else's evening." Ashley looked uncomfortable. Tyler was watching with wide eyes, and I could hear Mom clattering dishes in the kitchen with unusual intensity. But I was tired of family gatherings being held hostage by unspoken tensions and passive-aggressive behavior. "Fine," Jake said, putting his phone down with more force than necessary. "You want to address it directly. I think you're making a big deal out of nothing, and I don't understand why you're suddenly acting like you're too good to help your family." Too good to help your family. There it was, the accusation I'd been expecting all week. "I don't think I'm too good to help," I replied calmly. "I think my time has value and I'd like it to be treated that way." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means that if you need help with something, you ask rather than assume. You consider my schedule rather than just assigning me tasks. You treat me like an adult whose time matters rather than like a routine that's always available." Jake's face was reddening, and I could see Ashley trying to send him warning signals to back down. But he was committed to his position now, and Jake had never been good at admitting when he was wrong. "We do treat your time like it matters," he protested. "When's the last time you asked if I was available before making plans that involved me? We always check to make sure you're not working." "That's not the same thing, and you know it. Checking to make sure I'm not at my job isn't the same as respecting that I might have other plans or commitments." "What other plans?" Jake demanded, his voice rising. "You never do anything but work." "Maybe because every time I try to make personal plans, there's some family emergency that takes priority." "Family emergency? You mean like helping your nephew with school projects and driving your mother to doctor appointments? Real burdens, Sarah." The sarcasm in his voice was thick, but underneath it I could hear genuine confusion. Jake really didn't understand the difference between occasional favors and the constant stream of demands they placed on my time. Jake, I said quietly, in the past month I've picked Tyler up from school 6 times when Ashley was running late. I've driven Mom to 3 different medical appointments. I've troubleshot Dad's computer problems twice. I've helped you with your resume for that security job application. I've covered Tyler's soccer registration fee because it slipped your mind. And I've handled the insurance paperwork for Dad's car accident. The room was completely silent as I listed these things. I could see Ashley's face changing as she realized the scope of what I'd been doing without any acknowledgement or appreciation. But when I was recognized by the State Police Association last month, none of you came to the ceremony because you had other plans. That was different, Jake said weakly. How was it different? It was a work thing. It was recognition for 8 years of innovative community policing that has made this entire town safer. It was testimony to expertise that other law enforcement agencies want to learn from. It was acknowledgement that your sister has built something significant and valuable. My voice was steady, but I could feel years of hurt and frustration behind every word. But you had a poker game. Jake opened his mouth to respond, but Ashley put her hand on his arm. Sarah's right, she said quietly. We should have been there. The admission hung in the air like a released breath. It was the first time anyone in my family had acknowledged that they'd failed to support me in something important. We didn't realize, Ashley continued. I mean, we knew it was an honor, but we didn't really understand what it meant. You're always achieving things, so I guess we stopped paying attention to how significant they were. You're always achieving things, so I guess we stopped paying attention. The statement was both validating and heartbreaking. My consistent success had somehow made my achievements invisible to them, like background noise they'd learned to tune out. That's the problem, I said gently. My success isn't background noise. It's my life's work. It's what I'm passionate about and proud of. When you dismiss it or ignore it, you're dismissing and ignoring a fundamental part of who I am. Tyler had been listening to this entire exchange with the focused attention that only children bring to adult conversations they're not supposed to understand. Are you famous, Aunt Sarah? He asked suddenly. The question was so innocent and direct that it cut through all the adult emotional complexity we'd been navigating. Not famous exactly, I said, but people in law enforcement know who I am because of the work I've done here. That's so cool, Tyler said with genuine admiration. Can you show me your awards sometime? I felt my throat tighten unexpectedly. A 12-year-old was showing more interest in my professional achievements than his parents ever had. I'd love to show you my awards, I said. I want to see them too. Dad's voice came from the kitchen doorway. I turned to see him standing there with Mom, both of them clearly having listened to the entire conversation. You do? I asked, surprised. I do, Dad said, coming into the living room and settling into his usual chair. I think we've all been taking you for granted, honey. Your mother and I were talking in the kitchen, and we realized we don't really know what you do all day or why it matters so much to other people. This was perhaps the most honest thing my father had ever said to me about my career. For years his standard response to questions about my work was that I did something with the police, as if the details were too complicated or uninteresting to remember. I'd be happy to tell you about it, I said. Good, Dad replied, because after what your mother told me about her visit to your office, I think we owe you some better questions. Mom settled onto the sofa next to Ashley, and suddenly the entire family was looking at me with what appeared to be genuine curiosity rather than polite tolerance. Start with the community policing thing, Jake said. His earlier defensiveness replaced by something that looked like actual interest. Marcus was asking me all these questions about it, and I realized I couldn't answer any of them. Marcus? Of course Marcus had been asking questions. He understood the significance of what I'd accomplished in ways my family never had. Community policing is about changing the relationship between law enforcement and the people we serve, I began. Instead of just responding to crimes after they happen, we work to prevent them by building trust and partnerships with community members. How do you build trust? Tyler asked. Well, we put officers in schools not to discipline kids, but to be mentors and resources. We attend community meetings to listen to concerns. We work with local businesses and neighborhood groups to identify problems before they become serious crimes. And it works, Dad asked. Crime is down 30% since we implemented the program. But more importantly, community satisfaction with police is up 60%. People feel safer, and they're more willing to cooperate with investigations when crimes do occur. Ashley was nodding thoughtfully. That makes sense. If people trust the police, they're more likely to call when they see something suspicious. Exactly. And kids who see police officers as community helpers rather than authority figures to fear are less likely to get involved in criminal activity as they get older. Is that why you testified to the state legislature? Mom asked. I was startled that she knew about the testimony. You heard about that. I read the article in the newspaper, she admitted. I didn't understand all of it, but it sounded important. It was important. The state is considering legislation that would require all police departments to implement community policing programs based on what we've done here. If it passes, it could change law enforcement across the entire state. The room was quiet as this sank in. I could see them processing the idea that something I'd created in Riverside Heights might become a model for police departments everywhere. So you're kind of like a pioneer? Tyler asked. I suppose I am, I said, smiling at his terminology. That's awesome, he said, with the uncomplicated enthusiasm of childhood. You're like a police pioneer who makes things better for everyone. A police pioneer who makes things better for everyone. It was the most accurate and appreciative description of my work I'd ever heard from a family member. Why didn't you ever tell us any of this? Jake asked, and for the first time he sounded genuinely curious rather than defensive. I tried to, I said honestly. But every time I brought up work, the conversation got changed or dismissed. I learned that talking about my achievements made people uncomfortable, so I stopped doing it. We made you feel like you couldn't talk about your work? Mom asked, looking stricken. Not intentionally, I said gently. But yes, I got the message that my job was something to be tolerated rather than celebrated. Ashley was shaking her head slowly. Sarah, I had no idea. I thought you just didn't like talking about work because it was stressful. It is stressful sometimes, but it's also incredibly fulfilling. I love what I do, and I'm good at it. I'd like to be able to share that with my family without feeling like I'm bragging or making people uncomfortable. You should be bragging, Dad said firmly. If I'd accomplished what you've accomplished, I'd never shut up about it. The comment was so unexpected and so completely contrary to everything I'd been taught about staying humble that I laughed out loud. Really? Really? You know what your problem is, Sarah. You're too modest. We raised you to be humble, but somewhere along the way, humble became invisible. Humble became invisible. It was a perfect summary of the dynamic that had been frustrating me for years. I don't want to be invisible anymore, I said. Good, Mom said decisively. We don't want you to be invisible either. We want to know about your work, your achievements, your goals. We want to understand why other people think you're remarkable. Other people think I'm remarkable. Honey, Dad said gently. That friend of Jake's couldn't stop talking about you. He said you're transforming law enforcement in this region. He said other police chiefs call you for advice. He said you're being recruited by departments in major cities. Marcus had told them all that. I'd mentioned the recruitment offers in passing during our coffee meeting, but I hadn't realized he'd shared that information with my family. He also said, Jake added quietly, that he couldn't understand why we didn't seem to appreciate what we had in you. The admission was clearly difficult for Jake to make, but it felt genuine. For the first time in our adult relationship, he was acknowledging that he might have been wrong about something important. I don't need you to appreciate me the way strangers do, I said. But I do need you to see me as more than just the person who helps when you need something. We do see you as more than that, Ashley said quickly. Do you? When's the last time anyone asked me about my goals, my challenges, my hopes for the future? When's the last time anyone expressed curiosity about my life outside of how it affects your lives? The silence stretched long enough to become uncomfortable, which was answer enough. We're going to do better, Mom said finally. Starting now, tell us about your goals, Sarah. What do you want to accomplish in the next 5 years? The question was so unexpected that I had to think for a moment. When was the last time anyone had asked me about my long-term professional goals? I want to write a book about community policing implementation, I said. I want to speak at the International Association of Chiefs of Police conference. I want to establish a training program that other departments can use to transform their community relationships. That sounds incredible, Ashley said. And she seemed to mean it. It is incredible, Tyler added. Aunt Sarah, you're like a superhero for making places safer. A superhero for making places safer. Once again, the 12-year-old had found the perfect way to describe what I did for a living. What about personally? Dad asked. What do you want for your personal life? It was a question my family usually asked in the context of why I wasn't married with children yet, but this time it felt different. Like genuine curiosity rather than implicit criticism. I want relationships with people who value what I bring to their lives, rather than just what I can do for them. I said honestly. I want to feel like my success enhances my relationships rather than threatening them. The words hung in the air, and I could see each family member processing the implication that our current relationships didn't meet those criteria. We value you, Jake said quietly. I hope that's true, I replied. But I need you to show it in ways I can actually feel. How? Mom asked. Tell us how to do better. It was the first time anyone in my family had asked me to specify what I needed from them, and I realized I'd never really thought about it in concrete terms. Ask before assuming I'm available. Express interest in my work and achievements. Celebrate my successes instead of minimizing them. Stop treating my time as less valuable than everyone else's. I paused thinking. And maybe occasionally, when I'm having a hard day or facing a challenge, offer support instead of waiting for me to solve everything myself. We can do that, Ashley said firmly. We will do that, Dad corrected. Tyler had been listening to this entire conversation with the serious expression of someone trying to understand complex adult dynamics. Aunt Sarah, he said suddenly, I'm sorry we didn't come to your award ceremony. The apology from a 12-year-old hit me harder than all the adult explanations and justifications combined. Thank you, Tyler, I said. My voice slightly unsteady. That means a lot to me. When you get your next award, we'll all be there, he declared with the absolute certainty of childhood. When she gets her next award, Mom corrected gently. We'll ask her if she wants us there, and if she does, we'll make sure nothing else interferes. It was a small distinction, but an important one. She was acknowledging my autonomy while expressing their intention to prioritize my achievements. I would like you to be there, I said. Then we will be, Dad promised. As we moved toward the dining room for dinner, I felt something shifting in the family dynamic. It wasn't a complete transformation, and I knew there would be setbacks and challenges ahead. But for the first time in years, I felt like my family was actually seeing me as an individual with my own needs and achievements, rather than just as a supporting character in their own stories. The pot roast was perfect. The conversation continued
to focus on my work and goals, and Tyler asked approximately 15 questions about police procedure and community safety. When Jake's phone buzzed with what was obviously a group text from his poker buddies, he glanced at it and put it face down on the table without responding. Poker can wait, he said when he noticed me watching. This is more interesting. This is more interesting. It was such a simple statement, but it represented a fundamental shift in how my family prioritized my presence in their lives. As we cleared the dishes after dinner, Ashley approached me in the kitchen. Sarah, I owe you an apology, she said quietly. For what? For not understanding how much you do for us and for not appreciating how remarkable your career is. I've been thinking about it all week, and I realized that if one of my friends had accomplished what you've accomplished, I'd be bragging about knowing them. But because you're family, I somehow took it for granted. It was the most insightful thing Ashley had ever said to me about our relationship, and it gave me hope that these changes might actually stick. I appreciate that, I said, and I appreciate you being willing to see things differently. I want Tyler to be proud of his aunt, she continued. And I want him to understand that success like yours is something to celebrate, not something to minimize. He already seems to understand that, I observed. Kids are smart that way, Ashley agreed. They haven't learned yet that other people's achievements are supposed to be threatening instead of inspiring. Other people's achievements are supposed to be threatening instead of inspiring. It was a perfect summary of the dysfunctional thinking that had governed our family relationships for years. As I drove home that evening, I felt cautiously optimistic about the future. My family was beginning to see me as more than just a resource to be utilized when convenient. They were starting to understand that respect wasn't just about politeness, it was about valuing someone's time, achievements, and autonomy. There would still be challenges ahead. Changing established patterns was never easy, and I was sure there would be moments when they slipped back into old habits. But something fundamental had shifted, and for the first time in years, I felt like I might actually be able to have authentic relationships with the people who'd raised me. When I checked my phone before bed, I found a text message from Marcus. How did dinner go? I typed back, better than expected. Thank you for asking the right questions last weekend. His response came quickly. That's what friends do. Looking forward to our next coffee meeting. Friends. It was nice to have someone in my life who understood both my professional achievements and my personal struggles, someone who saw my success as something to celebrate, rather than something to manage. As I settled into bed, I reflected on how much had changed in just 1 week. I'd gone from parking 3 blocks away and accepting dismissive treatment to sitting at my family's dinner table talking openly about my goals and achievements. It wasn't a complete transformation, but it was a beginning. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. 3 months later, I stood at the podium of the International Association of Chiefs of Police conference in Chicago, looking out at an audience of law enforcement leaders from across the country. The presentation I was about to give on innovative community policing strategies represented years of work, countless late nights, and a vision for transforming how police departments connected with their communities. But what made this moment truly special wasn't the professional recognition or the packed auditorium. It was the fact that in the third row, Tyler sat between my parents, all three of them wearing matching Team Sarah t-shirts that Tyler had designed himself. Jake and Ashley flanked them with Marcus seated at the end of the row, all of them beaming with obvious pride. 6 months ago, none of them would have understood why this moment mattered. Today they'd flown to Chicago on their own dime, arranged their own accommodations, and taken time off work specifically to support me. The transformation hadn't happened overnight, but it had been steady and genuine. The presentation went well, better than well actually. The audience was engaged, asked thoughtful questions, and several department heads approached me afterward about consulting opportunities. It was the kind of professional validation I'd dreamed about for years, made sweeter by having people who truly understood its significance there to witness it. That was incredible, Tyler said as we gathered in the hotel lobby afterward. Aunt Sarah, you were like a teacher but for police chiefs. She was brilliant, Dad added, his voice thick with emotion. Sarah, I had no idea how much expertise you'd developed. Listening to those questions from other chiefs, I could tell they really respect your knowledge. It was still strange hearing my father express pride in my professional accomplishments without any accompanying suggestions that I stay humble or remember where I came from. The change in him had been the most dramatic of anyone in the family, perhaps because he'd finally understood that my success reflected well on the values he'd tried to instill in me, rather than threatening his own sense of achievement. The part about officer wellness programs was fascinating. Mom said, I never realized that taking care of police officers' mental health was part of making communities safer. She'd been asking increasingly sophisticated questions about my work over the past few months, clearly making an effort to understand not just what I did but why it mattered. The woman who used to change the subject whenever I mentioned work was now following law enforcement news and sending me articles she thought might interest me. Can we get dinner somewhere nice to celebrate? Ashley suggested. My treat. This is a big deal, and big deals deserve good food. My treat. Not let's find somewhere cheap or we should probably keep it simple. Ashley had begun treating my achievements as occasions worth marking with genuine celebration, complete with appropriate expense and fanfare. I made reservations at a steakhouse downtown, Marcus said, checking his phone. Table for 7 at 8 o'clock, if that works for everyone. He'd thought ahead, planned for celebration, anticipated that this would be a moment worth commemorating. It was the kind of thoughtful gesture that my family was finally learning to make, but Marcus had understood instinctively from the beginning. Over dinner, the conversation revolved around my presentation, the questions I'd fielded, and the consulting opportunities that had emerged. For 2 hours, I was the center of attention in the best possible way, with people who understood and appreciated what I'd accomplished asking informed questions and expressing genuine admiration. The chief from Denver seemed really interested in your crisis intervention protocols, Jake observed. Think you'll work with them? Probably, I replied. They're dealing with some of the same challenges we faced here, and they have the budget to implement comprehensive training programs. That's so cool that other cities want to learn from what you created, Tyler said. It's like you invented something important, and now you're sharing it with everyone. You invented something important, and now you're sharing it with everyone. Only Tyler could distill complex professional consulting down to its essential meaning with such clarity and enthusiasm. Will you have to travel a lot for consulting work? Mom asked, and I could hear the concern in her voice. Not concern that I was getting too big for my britches, but genuine worry about the demands on my time and energy. Some travel, but I'll be selective about which opportunities I take. I don't want consulting to interfere with my work here in Riverside Heights.
Good, Dad said firmly. This town needs you. But it's also exciting that your expertise can help other places too. It was exactly the kind of balanced perspective I'd always hoped my family would develop about my career. Recognition that my work had value beyond our immediate community, combined with understanding of my commitment to home. After dinner, we walked through downtown Chicago, Tyler peppering me with questions about urban policing challenges while the adults followed behind, talking among themselves. I caught fragments of their conversation and realized they were discussing my presentation with the kind of detailed analysis that showed they'd actually been listening and thinking about what they'd heard. "Sarah," Marcus said, falling into step beside me while Tyler examined a street performer's setup, "how does it feel to have your family here for this?" It was a good question, one that made me pause and really consider the contrast between this moment and how similar achievements had been received in the past. "It feels like finally being seen," I said honestly. For years I felt like I was living two completely separate lives. Professional Sarah, who was respected and valued and accomplished things people cared about. And family Sarah, who was just the reliable helper who happened to have a job that kept her busy. And now I feel like the same person in both contexts. They're finally curious about what professional Sarah does, and professional Sarah doesn't have to disappear when I'm with family. Marcus nodded. "That's huge. I could see the difference even at that birthday party back in July. You seemed like you were performing a role rather than being yourself." I was performing a role, the role of just Sarah, who didn't want to make anyone uncomfortable by being too successful or too passionate about her work. That must have been exhausting. It was. But I didn't realize how exhausting until I stopped doing it. We rejoined the group as Tyler finished his interrogation of the street performer and announced that he wanted to learn magic tricks to impress his friends at school. The conversation shifted to childhood interests and weekend plans, but even these ordinary family topics felt different now. I was included as a full participant rather than just the responsible adult who made sure everyone got where they needed to go safely. As we walked back toward the hotel, Jake fell into step beside me. "Sarah, I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "For what?" "For not understanding what you do, for not appreciating how hard you've worked, and for treating you like your time didn't matter." He paused, clearly struggling with the words. "I think I was threatened by your success, because it made me feel like I wasn't doing enough with my own life." It was the most honest thing Jake had ever said to me, and it explained so much about the family dynamics I'd never fully understood. "Your success isn't a judgment of my choices," he continued. "I know that now, and I'm proud of you, really proud. I just didn't know how to express it before." "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a lot. I want Tyler to see what real achievement looks like," Jake added. "I want him to understand that success comes from working hard at something you care about, not from luck or favoritism or shortcuts." He's already learning that. He asks great questions and pays attention to details. Those are the foundations of any kind of excellence. "He wants to be like you," Jake said. And honestly, I couldn't ask for a better role model for my son. The admission clearly cost him something, but it felt genuine. Jake was finally mature enough to separate his own insecurities from his appreciation for my achievements, and the result was a relationship that felt more authentic than anything we'd shared as adults. Back at the hotel, we gathered in the lobby to say goodnight and make plans for the morning. Everyone was flying out at different times, but we'd arranged to have breakfast together before the first departure. "Sarah," Mom said, pulling me aside, "I want you to know how proud your father and I are of what we saw today. Not just the presentation, but watching how those other professionals treated you. With such respect and admiration. It felt good to have you there to see it," I replied. "We should have been there for moments like this all along," she said quietly. "We missed so many opportunities to celebrate you properly. We can't change the past, but we can do better going forward." "We will do better," Mom promised. "Starting with that consulting contract celebration dinner when you get back home. I'm cooking your favorite meal, and we're inviting Marcus and anyone else you want to include." Consulting contract celebration dinner. The fact that she was already planning to mark my next professional milestone showed how much her perspective had genuinely shifted. As the group dispersed toward the elevators, Ashley lingered behind. "Sarah, can I ask you something?" "Of course. How did you know when to stop accepting the way we treated you? How did you find the courage to demand better?" It was a surprisingly introspective question, and I could see that Ashley was asking for herself as much as about me. I think it was seeing myself through Marcus's eyes, I said honestly. He couldn't understand why someone with my achievements would be treated with such casual disrespect. His reaction made me realize that what felt normal to me was actually completely unacceptable. Sometimes it takes an outsider to show us what we can't see ourselves, Ashley said thoughtfully. Sometimes it does, but the willingness to change has to come from within. You all chose to see things differently when I started asking for different treatment. We almost lost you, didn't we? She asked quietly. The question surprised me with its insight. You might have, I admitted. I was starting to think that having a relationship with people who didn't respect me was worse than not having a relationship at all. Ashley nodded slowly. I'm glad you gave us the chance to do better. Tyler needs to grow up seeing healthy family relationships, where people support each other's success instead of feeling threatened by it. He's going to be just fine, I assured her. He's already better at celebrating other people's achievements than most adults I know. The next morning's breakfast was relaxed and cheerful, with everyone comparing flight times and making plans for Christmas gathering at Mom and Dad's house. For the first time in years, I was looking forward to a family holiday instead of dreading the subtle criticisms and guilt trips that usually accompanied them. I'm going to research community policing programs in other cities before Christmas, Tyler announced over his pancakes. So I can ask you smart questions about your consulting work. You don't have to do homework about my job, I laughed. It's not homework if it's interesting, he replied with 12-year-old logic. Besides, if I understand what you do, I can tell my friends about it. My aunt is famous for making cities safer. That's pretty cool. Famous for making cities safer. Tyler had found yet another perfect way to describe my work that filled me with pride, rather than embarrassment. As we said our goodbyes at the airport, the hugs felt different than they had for years. Warmer, more genuine, less performative. These were embraces between people who actually knew and valued each other, rather than gestures of obligation between family members fulfilling expected roles. Text us when you land, Mom said, pressing a small wrapped package into my hands. A little something to remember this weekend. I opened it on the plane and found a small silver picture frame containing a photo Tyler had taken of me at the podium during my presentation. On the back, in Mom's careful handwriting, were the words "Our brilliant daughter, sharing her gifts with the world. We are so proud, love Mom and Dad." For the first time in my adult life, I cried happy tears on an airplane. The flight home gave me time to reflect on how dramatically my relationships had changed over the past few months. The transformation hadn't been easy or automatic. It had required difficult conversations, firm boundaries, and the willingness to risk conflict in pursuit of authentic connection. But the results had been worth every uncomfortable moment. I no longer felt like I was living a double life, hiding my professional success from people who should have been my biggest supporters. My family finally understood, not just what I did for a living, but why it mattered and how good I was at it. More importantly, they'd learned to see my achievements as additions to our family story, rather than threats to their own self-worth. Tyler was growing up with a model of success that emphasized hard work and service to others. Jake was discovering that supporting someone else's accomplishments didn't diminish his own value. Ashley was learning to celebrate excellence wherever she found it. Mom and Dad were rediscovering pride in a daughter they'd never stopped loving, but had somehow forgotten how to appreciate. And I was learning that demanding respect didn't make me selfish or difficult. It made me someone worth respecting. When I arrived back in Riverside Heights, there was a message waiting from the Denver Police Department, formally requesting a consulting contract to implement community policing protocols based on my work. It was exactly the kind of opportunity I'd dreamed about for years, validation from my peers, that the innovations I'd developed were worth replicating elsewhere. I called Mom first, knowing that 6 months ago, I would have minimized this achievement or not mentioned it at all. "That's wonderful news," she said immediately. "When do you start? Will you need help preparing materials or organizing travel?" When do you start, not whether I should take it. Will you need help, not whether this would interfere with family obligations. The shift in her response pattern showed how completely her perspective had changed. "I start next month," I said. "And yes, I might need some help with logistics. Would you be interested in being my unofficial assistant for special projects?" The offer surprised both of us. I'd never asked for family help with professional matters before, partly because I'd assumed they wouldn't be interested, and partly because their track record of understanding my work hadn't inspired confidence. "I would love that," Mom said, and I could hear the genuine excitement in her voice. "I've been reading about police reform initiatives, and I think I could actually be useful." She'd been reading about police reform initiatives. My mother, who 6 months ago couldn't explain what community policing meant, had been educating herself about my field because she wanted to understand and support my work. That evening, I sat in my office at home, reviewing the Denver contract and planning my approach to their implementation challenges. My phone buzzed with a group text from Jake: "Family dinner Sunday to celebrate Sarah's new consulting contract. Tyler insists on making a cake. Family dinner to celebrate my consulting contract." The idea that my professional achievements were now occasions for family celebration rather than sources of discomfort felt almost surreal. I typed back, "Sounds perfect. Should I bring anything?" The response came from Tyler's number. "Just stories about your presentation, and maybe some pictures of the conference." Just stories about your presentation. A 12-year-old was actively requesting to hear about my work accomplishments. The boy who would grow up understanding that success was something to celebrate, that expertise was something to value, that family members supported each other's achievements instead of feeling threatened by them. As I prepared for bed that night, I thought about the 3-block walk that had started this entire transformation. Marcus's simple question about why the police chief was parking so far away had forced me to confront patterns I'd accepted for so long that they'd become invisible. Sometimes it really did take an outsider's perspective to show you that what felt normal was actually unacceptable. Sometimes you needed someone to express confusion at your mistreatment for you to recognize that you deserved better. But the most important realization had been that I didn't have to choose between having a family and having their respect. I could have both, but only if I was willing to insist on it. Only if I was brave enough to risk their disapproval in pursuit of their genuine appreciation. The woman who used to park 3 blocks away and minimize her achievements to keep family peace was gone. In her place was someone who understood that real love didn't require diminishing yourself for others' comfort, that healthy relationships could withstand honest conversations about needs and boundaries, and that sometimes the greatest gift you can give your family is showing them who you really are and insisting that they see you clearly. My phone buzzed one more time with a text from Marcus. "Saw the news about the Denver contract. Congratulations, Chief. Well deserved." I smiled as I turned off the light. Chief, not Sarah. Professional recognition from someone who'd become both a colleague and a friend, someone who'd seen my potential from the beginning, and never asked me to make myself smaller for anyone's comfort. Tomorrow I would wake up as the same person in every context of my life. Accomplished, respected, valued, and finally truly seen by the people who mattered most. The 3-block walk was over. I was home. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up, just click and check them out.